On today's World Insight, after Democrat presidential bet Kamala Harris picks Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as running mate, uncertainty over U.S. economic and foreign policy grows as the November 5 election day nears. So, what's the best strategy amid uncertainty?
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Both the Republican and Democrat nominees for U.S. president have now bared their picks for vice president. Democrat standard-bearer Kamala Harris has chosen Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate, weeks after Republican Donald Trump went for Ohio Senator JD Vance. The 60-year-old Walz taught history and coached football before entering politics. He went on to be a military veteran, then a Minnesota congressman before he was elected the state's governor. With both the GOP and Democrat tickets now complete, the November U.S. elections are shaping up to be a nail-biter. That has created uncertainty about the outlook for the U.S. economic policy in the year 2025 and beyond, and certainly for the rest of the world as well. So how do we make sense of U.S. politics 3 months before the day at the polls? What's the best strategy amid uncertain times? Here is our panelist to give their answers. Joining us now on the latest regarding the U.S. presidential election in Washington, D.C., Peter Kuznick, professor of history at American University. In Shanghai, Joseph Gregory Mahoney, professor of East China Normal University, originally coming from the U.S. And also in Shanghai, Shending Li, professor at the Institute of International Studies with the Fudan University. Now we see that both camps have already announced that they're apparently having their choices of both the president and also the vice presidential candidates. So how do you see the latest assessment of voters' preference at this moment? Professor Mahoney.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that we have seen the Democrats reinvigorated by Biden pulling out and Harris coming in. We see the Democrats are competitive now, once again, especially in a number of the key swing states, with many possible paths to victory presented to the Harris-Walz campaign. And I certainly think that while there are some centrist and conservative Democrats who might have preferred that she pick Shapiro out of the governor of Pennsylvania as her running mate, the base is going to be more satisfied with Tim Walz, and this will shore up the base and allow her to run to the center, which I think overall will serve the ticket well.
Professor Kuznick.
This has totally shifted politics in the United States. The Democrats especially were very demoralized by Biden's performance and the thought of having Biden on top of the ticket. And once Biden stepped down and Harris got the support, and then with her choice of Tim Walz, everything is turned upside down. Whereas before, Trump had a significant lead in the polls. At this point, Harris has a small lead, as she's competitive in all the states where Biden was running behind. But there's more good news for the Democrats to come, I believe. They're going to have their big national convention, and that usually gives the party a bump. And the more that people see Tim Walz, and the better that Harris has been doing, I think that the Democrats' lead is actually going to grow.
Now, I know both of you are more experts about U.S. presidential elections than I am. From now until the near future, what are some of the steps that both camps are likely to take according to, earlier practices? That's likely to bring some timelines and also important points for re-examining the ups and downs of the two camps. Professor Kuznick.
Well, it's interesting that Trump has already made clear that he doesn't want to follow through on the September 11th debate that had been scheduled on ABC in the United States. Trump has now said he only wants a debate if it's on Fox News and there's a live audience. Well, Harris says she's going to show up anyway on September 11th. What we're seeing is Walz and Harris going aggressively throughout the Midwest. They're going to be very, very public right now. And the choice of Walz, I think, was quite brilliant on her part. As Joseph said, there was a lot of pressure to choose Shapiro.
Well, I agree with Peter that the real, other than the convention, and assuming that they're able to pull off a good convention, and I assume they will, how the debates between Harris and Trump, if they occur, how they match up, and certainly we haven't seen Tim Walz on the national stage yet, how he performs against JD Vance if they hold vice presidential debates. That said, I think that both campaigns, we've seen this in the past, they have no doubt sequenced a number of shocks or viral campaigns that will certainly try to influence and move public opinion. Those are more likely to come in October.
Some of the most important swing states are certainly going to be the focus of attention for all of us. Now, how would you analyze at this moment the realities there for both camps? Professor Mahoney, once again, briefly.
Well, again, I think that I agree with Peter that choosing Tim Walz was the smart decision here. He will appeal to Midwestern workers. These were the key in these swing states. And I think, by not choosing Shapiro, she didn't alienate him. I think we all anticipate that he'll probably have an important role in her cabinet. If she wins, she'll certainly be suggesting that, and he's going to campaign for her in Pennsylvania and has endorsed Tim Walz as the vice president. So I think she's going to fare much better than we anticipated the Democrats faring there.
Professor Shen, of course, as a Chinese scholar looking at U.S.-China relations and also doing American studies over the decades, you are observing this from afar in Shanghai. Now, the U.S. politics has already going beyond many people's imagination over the past few years, so to speak. What is your understanding of the latest situation, and how is China and many scholars here are looking at the latest situation?
We are watching what kind of politics, what kind of party platform they are going to adopt, which would be made in the next few weeks, and they would announce around the National Congress. And that would be defining.
National Convention, you mean?
Yeah, defining because two parties are very much contending for two major issues. One is border security. The other is job security. Why swing state would be uncertain because of those two issues. Swing states have lots of stake which are contentious. They have a job lost. But how to get a job back? By innovation, by forcing other countries to bring the job outsourced, returning to the U.S. There are different views.
Yeah.
So Democrats would like to have a Biden 2.0 policy or Harris 1.0. That would be defining. Otherwise, how many people love the new team of the Democrats? How many people would hate this team and would still love Biden and JD Vance? This is something we are watching. I think I'm watching how U.S. domestic politics would evolve. Of course, they have many other issues, gun possession, birth control, etc., abortion.
Having said that, though, Professor Kusnik, you're based in Washington. You look at the politics. You have been talking to the young people, namely the young voters, potential ones. So how much foreign policy still matter for today's American voters?
The general wisdom is that foreign policy matters very little, except under unique circumstances. However, with certain groups of voters, foreign policy is very important. I see with my own students, they were apathetic. They were very opposed to Biden's policy in support of Israel, but they were not going to vote for Trump. Now they're energized, they're organizing, they're active, and Harris's initial statements have been more sympathetic to the Palestinians than Biden had been before. So I think that's going to appeal to young people. It's going to appeal to people of color. It's certainly going to be important with that large Arab population in Michigan. And Walz is even more progressive in foreign policy and less hawkish than Harris is. Well, Trump's foreign policy, to the extent he has a coherent foreign policy, which is questionable, is less American engagement in the world, less American spending to help allies. And so he has said that he was going to end the war in Ukraine on his first day in office. That would be very good if he could do that. But the American people, by a 2-to-1 margin, want to see a settlement in Ukraine, want to see a negotiated settlement. And Harris is certainly going to be more able to go in that direction than Biden has been.
Professor Mahoney, your thoughts. How much foreign policy matters for American voters, at least from the latest phenomenon?
Well, I think, when we were looking at this election earlier this year and late last year, we were thinking that foreign policy was going to be a big driver. I think there was a lot of concern that China was going to be a central issue as Biden and Trump were fighting it out. And that hasn't played out. It's much more about domestic issues. I agree with Professor Shin that it's largely about job security and border security. Those are going to be the main issues. But underneath that, the culture war, the so-called woke versus, I guess, the unwoken, or whatever the term is for people who are more conservative or less open-minded about things. But I think to try to pick up on some of the other issues here, I think that one of the big things we're seeing is a generational shift. And while it's fair to say that Trump has a very strange foreign policy, in so much as it's oriented towards a fair amount of disengagement, it's still largely a Cold War view, I think. And certainly this is true of the Biden administration. Now, whether or not we have an opening with a new generation with Harris or someone like Walz remains to be seen. I wouldn't put too much stock on Walz's experience in China, as you noted. And at the same time, we have to recall that JD Vance is married to a woman of Indian descent, a practicing Hindu, who spent a year in Guangzhou as a Yale China fellow, and that's done nothing to really moderate his position on China. So, I think it's really going to be driven by, for the moment, that really it's going to be domestic issues. But certainly, both parties will be thinking about foreign policy, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of platform we get out of the Harris-Walz campaign, because right now they're simply running as the anti-Trump ticket.
How much do you see that will likely to work among voters? I mean, of course, we don't have the statistics to support it at this moment because it is still at the early stage. But Professor Mahoney, is that going to be the most pragmatic approach by the Democrats in fighting against the Republicans? Meanwhile, what do you think the Republicans are holding on to, especially the Trump campaign, against his potential opponents?
Well, I think it is going to be the main issue for the vast majority of voters. I would say that we have a template in terms of what we just saw happening in the UK, where the Labour Party ran effectively without a platform, just as the opposite of we're the alternative to the Tories, and they didn't really promise much new. In the case of the United States, I think we've seen again and again that Trump's hardcore support is somewhere between 40 to 44%. And then, we're talking about a 6% swing vote that could go either way. And I think in that case, the Democrats will compete very well because there is, let's say, somewhere around 48 to 49% of the country that really has a strong distaste for Trump. So as long as they can shore that up and keep that together and keep their base together, I think they can press the anti-Trump message. Because again, listen, everyone was really sick of Trump and Biden, and what Trump was running on was the anti-Biden message, and now he can't do that. So that carpet has been pulled out from underneath him, and but it's been handed to Harris. She can position herself as the anti-Trump, as something new, and that's what people really want. And I think that will probably be enough for her to win. But nevertheless, she will have to put forward a credible platform in order to be taken seriously.
Professor Kuznick, your assessment?
So we're seeing, as Joseph was saying, the Democrats running an anti-Trump and anti-Vance campaign. And that Vance has been a drag on the ticket so far. His ratings are even as low as, or maybe even lower than Trump's. So, and I think that Harris and Walz are going to be able to prosecute that case much more effectively. Women's rights is going to be a huge issue. Women's health care, women's control of ability to make choices about their own bodies is a very strong motivating factor right now in the United States. And the economy, we don't know which direction it's going to go, but in terms of jobs, in terms of compared to other countries, the United States has bounced back much better from COVID, from the pandemic, than most countries. And I think that Harris and Walz are going to make that case.
What about the Republicans? What kind of weapons do they have in their hands against the Democrats, do you think?
They're floundering. They haven't figured out what their message is going to be.
Professor Kuznick, you sound very party. You sound very party related, one party related when you are making that statement. If you could, what do you think can be the potential areas that the Republicans can have in mind in attacking the Democrats throughout the campaign, at least at the very beginning stage?
The big issue that they have is inflation. That many Americans are feeling very insecure economically. We know that 50–60% of Americans cannot come up with even a few $100s in an emergency right now. So the prices of food is high, the price of gas is high, housing, rents, those are all things that affect people on a daily basis. Trump's goal is to pin that on the Democrats and say the Democrats are responsible. Whether that's going to play, whether that's going to override other issues, we have to see.
We are seeing both sides in an interesting situation, at least for many from outside the United States, Professor Shen. That is, on the one hand, we haven't seen the Democrats clearly announced their policies approach, for example, with the latest apparent choice of the Democrats' presidential and vice presidential candidates. And meanwhile, we are not necessarily hearing the most updated version of Trump campaign's policies for the future. As many argued, Mr. Trump can be a very transactional person, and he can articulate his policies likely depending on the circumstances more than his opponents of the Democrat Party. So at this moment, how much do we know really about both camps and what it means for the rest of the world, including China?
For Democrats, they have two choices. One is to have Biden 2.0. Of course, it's not very much likely. But what will be the shape of the Harris 1.0? So we don't know. But as I mentioned earlier, two defining security issues. One is border security. Democrats is increasingly inviting unwelcome around the country because many people feel the failure in the border protection would make Democrats not to be liked by many.
Both sides have not necessarily been very clear yet about the policy approach toward their campaign. at this moment. And so as a result of that, how much would the rest of the world, including China, be able to, identify these candidates and also try to prepare for whatever the circumstances will be?
For Republican, they care security and development. Security, international security, U.S. stature would not be challenged. And the U.S. border security would not be challenged. U.S. job security would not be challenged. And Trump sees all this are being challenged. But how to handle this? He would ask any country that has a lot of export kind of benefit to buy more from America. So he beat China, he beat other countries, and eventually he seemed to get something by signing first stage China-US trade and economic agreement. But if he would be back, a bigger if, next year, he would find the agreement cut 5 years ago has not been honored, has not been completed. Therefore, he must ask China, why you guys have spent 5 years not to honor the agreement? So China need to be prepared for this question. First. Second, he said, I would finish the war in Europe in 1 day. But I don't think he will be able to do it. But if he would be able to do it in 2 days or 3 days, what would be the outcome? China need to think, would Russia work with China on the issue of Taiwan? Or would Ukraine excuse China for the China's performance? Their president has complained about China in Singapore at the Shangri-La summit. So we have to be prepared for this question. So border security, international stature is what Trump cares. In contrast with many would conceive him, I think he cares U.S. position not to be challenged. Therefore, NATO countries should spend 2% and even 3% of their GDP. And that would make them be prepared to answer Russia's military action.
Now, both camps have not very, very clear about their policy approach. And it makes the rest of the world even more restless and helpless in preparing for the future, how to work with America if they can. How do you see the latest situation?
Well, I do concur that we will probably see a significant amount of continuity from Biden to Harris if Harris wins. But I think it's also clear that despite the clear stylistic differences between Trump and Biden, there were a lot of continuities between those two administrations as well on foreign policy. Certainly, Biden exploited a lot of the openings that Trump created with his disruptive changes once he took power after Obama. But clearly, the world, even before Harris took the helm, even before Biden withdrew, the world was very anxious about what would happen in November because it indicated that we might see significant changes that could affect the EU, NATO countries, the UK-US relationship. We have a Labour Party in power now in the UK, and how would they work in a special relationship with Donald Trump and so forth and so on. So clearly there's a lot of concern, and by adding Harris to the mix, we've created the uncertainty, or we've increased the uncertainty to such an extent that I think a lot of people are struggling now to figure out what they should do to hedge or prepare for the possible return of either candidate. But clearly, we do have, I think, some parties who are interested in one candidate or the other. Perhaps Netanyahu, for example, may be interested in a Trump return. Perhaps Moscow is interested in a Trump return. And certainly we may see a number of international actors trying to influence the election through their own policies.
Professor Kuznick, your thoughts, same question.
Well, we don't know, except that Biden was a traditional Cold Warrior. He represents an older generation. Harris and Walz represent a younger generation. And if you look at younger Americans, they very much want a change in direction of U.S. policy around the world. And I think that Harris and Walz are going to be sensitive to that, are going to realize that Americans are tired of internet interventions internationally and are looking for a more cooperative approach. I see that potentially happening with China. I see a shift in policy in the Middle East, and hopefully with Russia also. But Harris will have to change a lot of things that she has said in the past in order to achieve that.
What about Trump campaign?
And Trump will be the same Trump. Trump never changes. Sure? As sure as I can be from having studied him for all these years. Trump, as Joe said before, is very transactional, or you said also, very transactional. But he also does not want the U.S. to be involved very much in the world. I think he's going to double down on his trade war with China. His comments are that he's going to increase the tariffs against China far more than they were before.
Yeah.
And he's more of a supporter of Israel than Biden has been. He's criticized Biden for saying anything negative about Netanyahu. So I think on those, he's going to be more hawkish.
Thank you so much for the three of you for joining us. Peter Kuznick, Joseph Gregory Mahoney, and Shending Li. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now. I'll see you tomorrow.